Take me through the timeline. Let's go through the timeline of what happened this week, where we are with Lewis and Clark.
Absolutely. I was wondering, what if we started with a timeline of who I am and the timeline of why I'm an educator?
Sure.
And how that rolled out over the past 27 years. Okay?
Sure.
So I started in education at an elementary school just outside of Reno, Nevada. And I started there because I had the opportunity through a grant to change my major and go into a classroom. And the very first role I had was working with students who spoke Spanish and their families in a cafeteria reading books in Spanish and English. And I sat around a table, and here is this group of community members, their families, their grandparents, their parents, the children at the school, and their younger siblings. And we sat around, had breakfast together, and I read a book in Spanish and English. From that moment forward, I knew that my place was to be an educator. And I changed my major and moved into that and became a paraprofessional at that school, and I loved every moment of it. So graduate in a couple years from Boise State University, and at Boise State, I had the opportunity to work for Boise School District, and I taught summer school to students who needed assistance in reading and mathematics, and I taught enrichment courses. There was one time I taught a fishing unit at Park Center Pond with groups of kids because I loved it so much. It was an opportunity just to be with students and their families and enrich their lives. My first job in the West Ada School District was actually at Ustick Elementary, and I got to teach 4th and 5th grade. And I had these opportunities in West Ada over the past 25 years to be a teacher at different schools in elementary, to be an assistant principal at elementary schools, to be a principal at Meridian Elementary School, and then to move on here and expand the impact of what I could do as an educator across more students and all students in West Ada as an area director, which is where I oversaw teaching and learning operations, and then in the role I'm at now, which is Chief Academic Officer. And I love this job. And the reason I love this job is because I get to impact students and their lives. I get to work with a team of educators who are dedicated to seeing the success of all students and making sure that every one of our students walks across stage, not just graduating, but with the skills, the understanding, and the mindsets of how to succeed in the world out there. And whether that's a career path or a college path, we just want all kids to succeed. And I want you to know that as a chief academic officer, and when I introduce myself to people and to groups, what I say is I get the opportunity to be your chief academic officer because this is more than a job to me. It's a calling, and it's what I do for every one of our students, staff members, teachers, principals, and families in the West Ada School District. So through and through, I am West Ada. I have been for 25 years, and I love every moment of what I do.
And that's great. And I sorry to interrupt you. That's wonderful. But I want to get to what happened this week.
Absolutely.
Tell me about this week. What happened at Lewis and Clark, and why are we having such an uproar?
Yep, that's the question. That this week, the conversation around what happened this week actually started back in January. Back in January, we started getting calls from our community and from families around concerns about displays, posters, and banners that were in some of our schools. And these were in schools on the other side of the district or spread throughout the district. And so what we did is we went in and we observed, and we created guidance around what is our policy 402.1. We then met with building principals and gave them that guidance, reminded them of the guidance of a policy that's been in existence for 3 years. And then the call to action was an audit of classrooms, an audit of hallways. And what that audit looked like was our building administrators were going to walk hallways. They were going to walk classrooms. They were going to use our policy to ensure that we followed that policy and provided additional guidance for teachers around those classroom displays. And here's the bottom line behind that policy. The bottom line behind that is everything needs to have a curricular tie. Everything does, because that's our call to action in the classroom. And when we build classrooms focused on teaching and learning and focused on students learning those standards, everything in that classroom needs to have a curricular tie. And whether that's a book on a desk, a resource in their hands, or something posted on the wall, it has to have that curricular tie.
Well, so what did she do wrong? This teacher over at Lewis and Clark. Obviously, there's this huge kerfuffle going on here. At Lewis and Clark, what did the teacher do wrong there? I hear what you're saying about it has to be tied to curriculum, but why everyone welcome?
Absolutely.
What's wrong with everyone welcome?
First of all, there is nothing wrong with the spirit of that poster, with welcoming students into our classroom and into our schools. The spirit of the poster, that's not what's wrong. It doesn't align to policy because it doesn't have a curricular tie. and therefore it can't be up. And so we provide that guidance. It's aligned to there. And again, we do this to create neutral classrooms so that students are learning so that they're focused on the content area that they're learning within that classroom, and to ensure that conversations are student generated. And those conversations and those questions are student generated because that's where that real learning takes place. And we want to make sure that students have that opportunity to come to those decisions themselves.
Okay, well, going back to the timeline from this week then, but why did the district refuse to be interviewed this week? If that was the case, where did that go sideways?
Well, the refusal to interview is really out of respect for what we do in West Ada. It really is around a conversation that took place between a principal and the teacher at that school. It really is a conversation around continued conversations that we need to have with that teacher in West Ada. But it's also around this true fact, which is us welcoming kids in West Ada is not about a poster on a wall. It's the culture of who we are. And culture is belief in action. Our actions and our beliefs about what we do and what we welcome students in West Ada, it isn't about the posters. It isn't about the interviews that we follow up on. It isn't about the emails to our community. What it's about is our incredible teachers meeting students at the door and greeting them. It's about our principals asking students how their day is going. It's about creating systems in our classrooms to ensure that all students are learning at high levels so that they can all succeed. It's making sure that students who need additional help get that additional help. But first and foremost, it's about the relationships we build with kids, because those trusting, kind, compassionate relationships where all students feel welcome because of the relationships, not because of the poster or a display on the wall. It's about our actions aligning with our beliefs, and those are so much more powerful than any piece of paper we can hang up.
As an aside, I'm trying to decide how nasty I want to get with you and how much I want to, I don't think Matt's going to do that. So
Matt's going to ask those questions exactly the way you asked him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so what about this? Why is that such a problem?
Yeah.
What Matt does then is he then interjects his beliefs in that and then says, what do you think about that? Then I have to always come back to these, which is fine. I appreciate that, but that's exactly what he does.
Yeah. And that's okay.
I think the spirit of the poster conversation is a good one. I can get there. It's the content relevant needs to be there. I think this is probably, there's the potential here of beating a dead horse pretty quick.
Well, and I think,
me.
yeah, and I think less is more.
I think you're right.
I think less is more. Don't go on and on.
The poster doesn't align to curriculum. The poster is not. It's not about the content in the classroom. That's what's on there. It doesn't align with that policy as a result of that.
Yeah.
And because of that, everything we do needs to be content relevant. Here's the other piece. The poster can be perceived differently. In fact, in the news recording, in the release, the reporter himself provided his interpretation of the poster. There have been multiple interpretations of the poster just from the emails that I've received and that we've received. And so the poster itself can be interpreted differently. That is the reason behind the policy, so that students can create their own interpretation, not what we hang up develops that interpretation.
Okay, so tell me about this policy. What is West Ada's policy? Why? Give me that. I need to know what the policy is.
So the policy 401.2 is directly about what we do in classrooms to create a neutral classroom and guide student learning so that they can develop their own understanding. And what it does is it provides definitions of what can be posted on the wall. It provides definitions of how we introduce controversial subjects within a classroom. It provides definitions of what we do as educators to give that information to students and let them come up with their own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs.
But doesn't the district have an obligation to let the public know what's going on? I mean, why has this turned into the situation that it has?
Absolutely. The district has an obligation to let them know what's going on, but here's the deal. West Ada is so focused on our students, our learning, and what's happening in the classroom that we are willing to dedicate our energies to our students in the classroom and what is going on here, because that's who we are and that's what we believe in. Yes, we want to communicate with our families. Yes, we want to communicate with our public, but our energies are spent in schools, in classrooms, taking care of the students that we were given care of.
You're a good communicator. I'm trying to give you direction too because I don't want you to necessarily I want you to. You're a great communicator,
I want to be a human. So here's where I'm going to.
But why don't you be laid back?
I have to insert stories, and that's what that's going to get that to me. So, and it can't be stories about me. It's got to be stories like I'm driving down Eagle Road.
Yeah.
It's busy. It's cumbersome. I'm late, and I want to get there. And there's signs posted all over about what I can do. And although I want to speed and I want to get there faster, I don't. Because at the end of the day, great organizations tell you what the speed limits are. And that's exactly what our policy manual does on West Data. It defines what we do in our classrooms, because when we don't, things get messy and accidents happen. And so we want to make absolutely sure that we're following that policy. And that's part of my job in West Data as Chief Academic Officer, to ensure that every classroom is set up for every student, from the books that we use to the posters that we hang. And this isn't just a West Data issue. Remember, our legislators right now are crafting legislation on House Bill 41, which defines just this. So it's an issue that faces our state. It's an issue that faces our nation. And guidance was created in West Data 3 years ago. It's being created as a state now, and it's likely we'll see that legislation.
The way you answered that question, just the vibe. Earlier, you're here and you're here,
yeah.
and so I don't know what you do. I'm not telling you to lay back, but the way, when you go back and look at the tape, the way you just answered that question, like, listen, we're here to help. We and not to. I want you to be you, but does that make sense?
No, I get it.
I want you to be a little less. You know what I mean?
Damn it, this is what we're doing.
Because I do it that way too. But in this situation, being human. Can you clarify the district's definition of content neutrality and how it applies to classroom operations?
I'm trying to think of a story with this one, because I'll bet that'll be a bit like, what does it mean to be content neutral?
Yeah,
right?
What does it mean to be content neutral? That's the question.
Okay, I think I got it.
So content neutrality. What does that look like in West Data?
So we want to create learning environments for kids where any student that walks into that room has an opportunity to, based on their own feelings, the thoughts of their families, to come up with their own conclusions. What that's like is, it's like walking into a room that's been freshly painted, that might have a little bit of furniture in it, and that you have the opportunity to like decorate it yourself, right? It's about you and who you are. So it's a little bit like that student walking into their bedroom for the first time. It's brand new. It's all freshly painted. There's a little bit of stuff. They get the opportunity in their minds to hang up what they want. They get the opportunities in their minds to hang up what they believe in. They get to take what we're teaching them with skills and content and develop their own understandings. If you walk into a room that's already decorated for you, the posters are already on the wall, all the stuff is already there, it takes away that opportunity for students. And so we want things on the walls that have curricular ties, because it supports learning and what they're learning. But even then, we want that limited, because we want students to have the opportunity to walk in and say, you know what, I can express my ideas here. I can come up with my own thoughts and conclusions with this, and I have the opportunity to be a part of the decorating of that room, which isn't just the room itself, but what's in their minds and what they build.
Yeah, okay, but everyone welcome here. What's wrong with everyone welcome here? I want my kids to be welcome. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but what's wrong with that sign?
Again, the spirit of the sign, there's nothing wrong with the spirit of the sign. What we want to make sure of, though, is that everything that's talking about has a curricular tie. That it has a curricular tie, and that is what's in the policy. It needs to have a curricular tie in that policy. In this particular situation, she is a social studies teacher. She is a world civilizations teacher. That being said, that doesn't have a curricular tie to the poster that's in question here. Although I think she makes that connection.
Okay.
That's part of the problem. And that was part of the principal's issue, which is she does make a connection between that poster and the civilizations of the world in between then. That's where I think that one for me, because even though she didn't make it in the That was actually one of the problems. Because she's like, well, I teach about all cultures in the world. I teach about all Eastern geographic, I teach all this piece. And this is just part of it. Yeah, okay.
Gotcha.
So I think that's part of it. But you're right. That one's going to be tough because there are some areas in policy, and maybe that's it. Maybe there are some areas in policy where we have to make a call. Maybe that's it. There are some areas in policy where I have to make a call. In order to make that call, I sit down with a team of people. I sit down with members of the executive team. I sit down with legal counsel. I sit down with our curriculum coordinators and people who have insight and expertise. And then I sit down with building administrators. And in this situation, I sat down with that principal, with the teacher, and a representative from the teacher association. And together, we had this conversation. And rather than providing an answer right there in the moment, I came back to the team and I gave it a couple weeks. We thought it through. We talked it through. And then I gave a response that said, you know what? Based on this team's decision, we do think it's against policy, but we want to give you some time. And so we gave you till summer. I offered to even pay for additional materials. Let's find a different poster that aligns differently. Let's find an opportunity here.
So it's a case by case. It can be a case by case basis.
It can be a case by case basis. That's what you're saying? Okay. And in this case, we gave it till summertime so that we could just make that transition in summertime and what that might look like.
Okay, well, and I don't want to mess with your brain, but because I do like the Eagle Road 55 mile an hour analogy as well. But it's like if I'm to go back to today's letter, if I'm a basketball official, just because it's the end of the game, I can't let a walk go, or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to go, but we have to go by rules, and I think that's a space that's free from political, religious, or ideological influence. I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking about, but that's too many words. I love what you just said there.
But I think I should get back to, I would like to have, I want to keep that with me because I do think that's a spot where Matt would let me pause for a moment.
Sure.
And look at, and come back. So I give my story, what my conversation with, then I say, and that's directly referenced in policy when it states this right here. It's free from this. And the reason we want it that way is that students can walk in and develop their own understandings based upon what their family believes in, what they believe in, and who they see themselves in the future.
And education is the focus.
And that's what we do in education.
What specific criteria were used to determine that the removed sign violated district policy?
The criteria we used is specifically within that policy itself. And when and looking at that criteria specifically, I think referencing that, right, that a room is free from that.
Yeah.
I can say specifically in the policy, here is this, because we're always trying to get to, what am I thinking?
Non-neutral.
I think if he's going to ask those, I need to have it.
And I don't know that he will ask this. And frankly, these are questions that I'm brainstorming.
Well, no, he might. And those are good ones, though.
But I think I do, what specific criteria were used? And I don't want to keep coming back to the current political climate, but the current political climate does matter.
Well, that's why in the interview she had said, district administration kept saying, the current political climate that we're in now, the reason this might not have been a problem 3 years ago and that it's a problem now is because political climates change. They really do.
Right.
And here we are.
And that's the case-by-case basis.
And that's the case-by-case basis. I think getting into that might be a little rough, and Matt probably won't use that. But
well, again, I think less is more, and I love these talking points.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna break this down. I'll rewrite these so I can actually read what I'm doing here. But I'm gonna add like a metaphor story to each of these. What we do in West Data. I think we add
humanity, storytelling
in there. But then also have there needs to be a page of the direct quotes from policy that I can look at and say, well, specifically what in the policy made that, I understand what you're saying, but specifically what in the policy said you had to take it down. And I'm going to read that right there. Specifically, it says this.
Well, and we're committed to ensuring that this policy is applied consistently and fairly across all classrooms. I can keep on putting in some bullet points that I think that matter, but I don't want to mess with you.
No, I can highlight. I just want like a few of them I can look at right there on the table and be like, specifically, here's what it is.
How does the district differentiate between a personal opinion and a general statement of inclusion? That's where I'm down there. I doubt he'll get this specific, but I do want to be prepared.
But I think personal opinion, a general statement of inclusion. Right, because a general statement of we are welcome here, they're up all over the place. Not a problem. So what is it about this poster that doesn't make it this way? And I think I could say, well, because in today's political climate, it isn't free from political, religious, or ideological influence. And it does create a narrative by hanging it up on the wall. And in doing so, that's the part of the policy that doesn't create that classroom where students have an opportunity to generate their own thoughts and feelings. So having those specific, this one I think is super important to have on there. I also think this committed to ensuring is applied consistently and in this current political climate. Like there are some, I think some of these too, like I need to have some of these ready to go.
Well, and I'll continue to, anything that could be interpreted as advocating for a specific ideological, rather than reflecting on universally accepted educational. I'll keep on preparing this document. If you will find value in it,
I will find tons of value in that.
Well, I'll keep on working on this because I think, but yeah, the basic gist, stories and humanity, you know.
That's what I need to do. Like, there's this human side to what's been awfulized that isn't there, and
Well, and even if Matt doesn't address these things,
I need to.
Another journalist will. The district promotes Explore Way posters encouraging students to welcome others and embrace diversity. How do those posters align with or differ from the signs that were removed? Because the district's got these signs that do that. Why was this sign different? And I've already put in some bullet points to what I think of how we answer that. But I think Brian Holmes would ask that question.
And he should.
Yeah.
Matt will not.
Yeah.
But Brian Holmes will ask that question.
Absolutely.
Because he zoomed in on that in the deal. The term diversity is right in there. He should have found that. And the moment he did that, I was like, yeah, I get that. But you're right. It was district approved initiative built with students, along with students, built with staff as a group.
Yeah.
And it's common across every room. And it supports what we do to build positive culture within West Ada.
And I've put bullet points in there. I don't know if it aligns with the thinking, but those were my thoughts.
Yes.
That may or may not be helpful to you.
No, this third bullet right here is stellar because that is truly the answer. Because it's a personal belief rather than a communicated belief of the entire school itself, it drives its personal. It becomes personal that way.
And I don't want to talk out both sides of my mouth because less is more. But if that's the way to answer it, and you can come up with a way, well, just do that. But is there a story from your educational past? And it doesn't have to be. But if that's the answer, then we answer the question and we move on.
You know what this is? So the story from a pastor is these are what we build in these. They're called collective commitments. It's what we commit to together. And that includes, excuse me, students, staff, parents, teachers. It's everybody's collective commitment at Lewis and Clark. We develop those in many of our schools. I developed those as a principal. I developed those as a teacher because I wanted to say together, these are our beliefs and these are the actions that align with this belief. This was co-created together as a team, and therefore it should be hung up on every wall. It should be there. But an independently displayed posted message with text and visuals that does display a theme, that's a personal belief, can't be up on the wall according to this policy. So I do like this third one.
Okay, cool.
Quite a bit.
And maybe what I'll do is I'll work through this when we get done, and I'll just send it to you in chat or whatever.
It's so good, yeah. And then I'll add to it and highlight. Like I'll probably highlight my favorite parts. Like these are my go-to ones.
Yeah.
That's super helpful.
Have similar messages been removed from other classrooms in the district?
Yes, they have.
If so, can you give me some examples of that?
Very similar examples where those messages communicated an individual's belief and not necessarily the belief of the entire school, the Westdata School District. We've had very similar images being removed, and some of those were made in request from patrons and from families and from parents, and some of those requests came directly from teachers and administrators.
Can you talk about that, or does privacy not allow you to talk about that from a legal standpoint?
I can't share who communicated those concerns with us, but what I can share is very similar posters, very similar visuals within that communicated what is a good message, a message we all believe in, a message I believe in. It communicates that message really well. However, they're designed, formatted in a way, they have additional visuals that create a political and ideological message.
Are you a racist?
I am not a racist. I did not get into education to be a racist. I got into education to support all students, to support all families, because I have strong beliefs that education is a life right, that everybody has a right to education. I am not a racist. I am not part of an organization that is a racist organization. I work with incredible people each and every single day who are dedicated to every single one of our 40,000 students.
Are there any other types of classroom posters or messages that have been deemed non-neutral under this policy?
There have, and we have provided that guidance. Like I said, part of this conversation started in January, and it was quickly followed by a conversation with our building principals who did an audit. They walked buildings, they observed, they looked, they started having conversations with teachers. Most of those conversations led to a teacher just pulling it down. They pulled it down themselves. After our conversation around the policy and what that looked like, teachers said, "Oh, I understand, I get this." We have had one instance out of our 3,500 plus employees in the Westdata School District who have refused to take it down, and this is that one incident.
How does the district ensure that policies around neutrality don't inadvertently discourage inclusivity in classrooms? Because you want both, right? I mean, how do you find that balance?
Sure, we do that in two ways. The first way is our actions always promote inclusivity. We make sure that what we say, how we act, how we interact with kids, our relationships and our communication always promotes that inclusivity. What we don't rely on in Westdata is a piece of paper hung on a wall that communicates that for us. Our words out of our mouth and the actions of what we do each and every single day as educators is far more important and far more critical, and that is the expectation. The expectation is about action, not what we buy for $9.99 and put on a wall.
Love that. That's gold. You know, and again, we're more about actions, driving that point home. And if there's a story to tie that, a quick story to tie that in, I think that would be gold.
Okay.
Just so you know. What guidance is provided to teachers to help them navigate what is considered neutral versus a violation? How are you helping teachers navigate this?
Absolutely. So the first thing we do is we rely on really great building leaders, our building principals and administrators who get to know that policy real well. Part of my job as a chief academic officer is to create training opportunities, and we tie this into some training opportunities. A lot of times those happen prior to when something takes place, but sometimes they happen after an incident occurs, and we want to address it, similar to what we did in January after our first, after we received some initial communication and some concerns. And so first thing we do is we sit down with our building principals and we train really carefully. And we train just not around what is the policy, but how to have those conversations with our staff members and our teachers. And so the call to action was to go out and start those conversations. That if we saw something that was questionable in terms of policy, not to just rip it off the wall and take it down, but to have a conversation with a teacher and talk to them about why this might be a violation of policy or why this isn't a violation of policy. We provided some examples of what that might look like for our building administrators, and together through those conversations, we built an example bank. We had pictures. We had, we knew we had a exemplar definitions of what this looks like.
So sorry to interrupt you, but you're trying to figure out examples and show teachers what's going on given this current political climate we're in.
Absolutely, because we're all in this political climate that we're in. And policy, there is an interpretation in every one of our policies. And so together, if we can build that definition as we begin to have the conversation, that's what's important in that. which is why the call to action was not to go in and rip this off the wall. And that's exactly what didn't happen in this teacher's class, in Sarah's classroom as well. There was a conversation that occurred. Then there was 2 weeks of thought and meetings and conversation and comparing it to other visuals. And then a decision was made as a team with multiple perspectives and with legal counsel involved. A decision was made, and then that decision was communicated through an email, not a reprimand conversation, not a letter of concern or consequence. It was a quick email to say, this isn't policy after review. This isn't policy, and we're going to give you 5 more months to replace it out. So when you start up next school year, and by the way, I'd be happy to support buying whatever else you might look. So hop on somewhere, hop online, find a replacement. Let's get that and let's make that work. Because again, the spirit of the poster is right on. We just want to make sure that it does fall in line with that policy.
What has the district received feedback from parents and students or teachers about this decision? And if so, what's the response been?
We have received feedback. We've received feedback on all of the situations where parents have communicated with us that their concerns, and this is no different. There's 2 types of feedback with this. There's feedback that says, I completely disagree with what you're doing. There's feedback that says, I very much agree with what you're doing. And because in the political climate we're in now, that's very divided, and education is no different with that. Our families, our community is divided in that. And we want to be able to have those conversations, but at the end of the day, I'm charged with making a decision. Me and my team are charged with making those decisions, and that's my job as a referee in this school district, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure our students benefit from it.
I love that talking point. Like, this is my job. I have to ignore all the noise, and I don't know how you phrase this in your words, but I have to ignore all the noise, and I have to do my job. I have to give our students, our administrators, banks of the river. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there's, but I love what you just said there.
Okay.
And utilizing that. I haven't even thought about this yet. So how does the district interpret Idaho's Dignity and Non-Discrimination in Public Education Act in relation to inclusive classroom messaging?
Yep. So that term, neutral classroom environment, where students walk in and political messages are not being shared with students inadvertently, that we continue to have that neutral, free learning environment, that is how we interpret that law.
Does the district believe that a sign promoting respect and equality could be interpreted as promoting a divisive concept?
The district believes that the spirit of that sign is a spirit that we hold true in West Ada as well. What we cannot promote in that are visuals, additional pictures, and a formatted a poster that conveys a political belief.
I loved the brevity of that response. Sometimes brevity is good. Has the district sought legal guidance on how to balance content neutrality with fostering a welcoming learning environment?
Yes, we have. And in fact, we have our own legal counsel here right at West Ada, and she's one of the best in the state. Other districts seek out her guidance and her support and have so for many years. So with that legal counsel, we always follow her guidance, and it was followed in this as well.
How does the district ensure its policies and actions do not disproportionately target educators promoting inclusion?
Disproportionately targeting
How does the
inclusion.
district ensure its policies and actions don't disproportionately target educators promoting inclusion?
Well, the first thing we do is we create policies that apply to everybody. And in this particular policy, it's stated in the language that it applies to everybody and it's applied consistently. And so rather than deciding who's promoting inclusion and who isn't, first of all, we would want to promote that with all of our teachers through their behaviors. But in terms of posters, banners, and what this looks like, it applies to everybody, as it states in the policy.
What steps is the district taking to reassure teachers, students, and families that schools remain safe, inclusive spaces for everyone?
Yep. So in addition to the actions that, in addition to the expectations that we have for our teachers and for our administrators to create welcoming, friendly, compassionate environments in every classroom, because that's where students learn best, we have a team of people who oversee safety and behavior in the West Ada School District. And that safety and behavior includes our mindsets and attitudes among students, but also among our staff. It's a full team of people, of professionals who have been trained in behavior, who have been trained in safety, and who have been trained in supporting students. And in fact, we've opened up schools that are specific to supporting those behaviors and making sure that all students have an opportunity to learn them.
What about all the outside noise, all the feedback on social media and all the things that you're getting? How does that affect? Does that matter to you?
It matters to me. And it matters to me because it's feedback. And it's things that we can take as a team and reflect on and take a look at our practices. However, what we don't do in West Ada is allow the noise to take us from our calling, which is educating our students at high levels each and every single day.
Do you think it's any accident that all that's going on nationally with the Department of Education, is there any tie in there to what's happening nationally, to what's happening in West Ada this week?
This was no accident at all. I think it was directly timed along with this and the conversation we've had politically in the Department of Education, politically timed both by the reporter and by the teacher.
I just threw that question in there. Boy, I don't know how to. I don't like that answer, but it's not wrong.
It's true.
It's absolutely true.